The sky above New York City turned dark at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. It was not clouds that blocked the sun. It was ships. Thousands upon thousands of alien warships hung in the air like a metal ceiling stretching from horizon to horizon. Captain James Walker was eating lunch in Central Park when he saw them appear. His sandwich fell from his hands as he stood up and stared at the impossible sight above him. All around him, people stopped walking. Cars stopped moving. The entire city went silent except for the distant sound of car alarms and screaming. The year was 2347, and humanity had spread across 17 star systems. They had colonies on dozens of planets and moons. They had built great cities among the stars, but in all their travels through space, they had never found other intelligent life. Many scientists had begun to believe that humans were alone in the universe. They were wrong. The alien fleet had appeared without warning. One moment the sky was clear and blue. The next moment it was filled with ships of every size. The smallest ones were bigger than football stadiums. The largest ones were bigger than mountains. They made no sound as they floated above Earth's major cities. Within minutes, similar reports came from every human world. The aliens had appeared everywhere at the same time. Mars, Europa, the colonies around Alpha, the mining stations near Tau. Every human settlement looked up and saw the same terrifying sight. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The ships simply waited. People panicked. Governments held emergency meetings. Military forces scrambled to prepare defenses that everyone knew would be useless. And then, at exactly the same moment across all human space, the aliens made contact. A single ship descended from the fleet above Earth. It landed in the center of the United Nations Plaza in New York, crushing several buildings beneath it. A door opened in its side, and Ambassador X stepped out. He was unlike anything humans had imagined aliens might look like. His body was made of something that looked like living crystal. He stood 12 feet tall, and light seemed to bend strangely around him. When he moved, it was with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. His face, if it could be called a face, had no features except for 2 points of bright blue light where eyes might be. Secretary General was waiting for him with a group of world leaders and translators. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm brown eyes. She had led Earth through 2 major crises before this day, and she had earned a reputation for being unshakable. But even she felt her heart racing as she watched the alien approach. X stopped in front of her and spoke. His voice was like glass breaking in slow motion, but somehow the words were clear in every human language at once. "I am Ambassador X of the Hegemony," he said. "I have come to accept your surrender." Kept her face calm. "We have not offered any surrender." "That is not relevant," X replied. "The hegemony has ruled this section of the galaxy for 60 million years. We have brought 312 species under our control. Your species is the 313th. You will submit to hegemony rule or you will be destroyed. These are the only options." The world leaders behind began whispering urgently to each other, raised her hand for silence. "And if we refuse?" she asked. X made a sound that might have been a laugh. "No species has ever refused. Your technology is primitive. Your military strength is insignificant. You have 800 ships. We have brought 10,000, and this is merely our local fleet. The full military power of the hegemony is beyond your ability to count." He reached into a fold in his crystalline body and pulled out a small device. When he activated it, a holographic display appeared in the air, showing images that made several of the watching humans gasp in horror. The images showed worlds burning, cities reduced to ash, entire species being marched into slave camps or simply exterminated. The display showed 60 million years of conquest compressed into a few terrible minutes. "Every species that has faced us has made the same calculation," X continued. "They look at our power, and they look at their own, and they choose survival through submission. You have one standard rotation, approximately 30 of your hours to make your decision. If you do not surrender by then, we will begin the systematic destruction of your civilization." He turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at. "I have performed this duty 92 times for 92 different species. I tell you this so you understand that I speak from experience. Resistance is not merely futile. It is meaningless. You cannot hurt us. You cannot stop us. You can only choose how many of your people die before you accept the inevitable." Looked up at the alien ambassador. She was 63 years old. She had on Mars. She knew with absolute certainty that what X said was true. Humanity could not win this fight. The math was simple and terrible. But had not become Secretary General by doing the easy thing. "Tell me," she said, her voice steady and clear, "what happened to those species who refused to surrender?" X paused. For a moment, his crystal body flickered with colors that might have indicated confusion. "None have refused," he repeated. "Not one," pressed. "In 60 million years, not a single species looked at your fleet and decided they would rather die fighting than live as slaves." Those who considered such foolishness quickly recognized the wisdom of survival. Nodded slowly. Then she did something that would be remembered for as long as humans told stories. She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just made a decision that would change the course of history. "Then you have never fought humans," she said. The alien ambassador stared at her with those points of blue light. Around them, the world leaders had gone completely silent. The cameras that were broadcasting this moment to every human world captured every detail of what happened next. "You are refusing?" X asked. There was something in his voice now, something that almost sounded like uncertainty. "I am telling you," replied, "that humanity does not surrender, not to threats, not to fear, not to impossible odds. We have fought each other for our entire history. We have survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have ended us 100 times over. We did not crawl up from the mud of our world and reach the stars so that we could kneel to the first bully who showed up with a bigger stick." She took a step toward him, and though she barely reached his waist, she held his gaze without flinching. "You want our surrender? Come and take it. Bring your 10,000 ships. Bring your 60 million years of conquest. Bring everything you have. Because I promise you this, Ambassador, before this is over, you will learn what humans do to those who threaten our children. You will learn why every predator on our world learned to fear us. You will learn that some prey bites back." X stood motionless for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to his ship without another word. As his vessel rose into the sky to rejoin the waiting fleet, turned to face the cameras. Behind her, 10,000 alien warships waited to destroy everything she had ever known. "People of Earth," she said, "people of every human world, you have heard their demands, now hear mine. We have 30 hours. Let us show them what humanity can do in 30 hours." The broadcast ended, and across 17 star systems, humanity began to prepare for war. The hegemony had conquered 300 species over 60 million years. They had developed a science of subjugation. They knew exactly how civilizations responded to the threat of extinction. First came denial, then fear, then desperate attempts at negotiation, and finally surrender. The process usually took less than a day. They watched humanity through thousands of sensors and monitoring devices. They waited for the familiar patterns to emerge. They waited for the panic, the infighting, the collapse of social order that always preceded submission. What they saw instead broke every model they had ever created. Within 6 hours of broadcast, something happened that had never happened in human history. Every nation on Earth, every colony in space, every faction and government and military force set aside their differences. Old enemies shook hands. Disputed borders became meaningless. Resources that had been hoarded for generations were freely shared. The United Human Defense Force was created in a single emergency session that included every leader of every human settlement. Admiral, a veteran of the colonial conflicts who had been hours away from retirement, was given command of every ship humanity possessed. He stood in the command center of the battleship Defiance and looked at the numbers on his screen. 847 human ships against 10,000 enemy vessels. His tactical officers had calculated their odds of victory. The number was so small it was essentially zero. Admiral deleted the calculation from his screen. "I want every ship ready for combat in 24 hours, he ordered. "I want every weapon loaded, every system at maximum power, and I want solutions." "Sir," his second-in-command said carefully, "our weapons cannot penetrate their shields. Our ships cannot match their speed. "I know what we cannot do," interrupted. "I am asking you to find what we can do. Humans have been solving impossible problems since we figured out how to make fire. This is just one more." Across human space, the same scene repeated itself in different forms. Scientists who had been working on theoretical projects suddenly had unlimited funding and resources. Engineers who had been told their ideas were too dangerous or too expensive were now told to build them as fast as possible. On Titan, one of Saturn's moons, there was a research station that most people had never heard of. Dr. Sarah ran a small team there, working on something called quantum disruption technology. The theory was simple. The reality was that every test had resulted in explosions that nearly destroyed the station. "It is not stable enough," one of her researchers said. "We are years away from making this work safely." Sarah looked at the latest data from the alien ships. She saw their shield frequencies, their hull composition, their power signatures, and she saw something interesting, something that made her smile despite the fear that had settled in her stomach. "We do not need it to be stable," she said. "We just need it to work once. Look at their shields. They are designed to stop kinetic weapons and energy beams. They are not designed to stop quantum disruption because no one has ever used quantum disruption as a weapon. Because it kills everyone who tries to use it," her researcher pointed out. "Then we make sure the people using it know what they are signing up for." She sent her findings to Admiral within 8 hours of the alien ultimatum. Within 12 hours, she had 1,000 volunteers who were willing to pilot ships equipped with weapons that would almost certainly kill them when they fired. Similar breakthroughs happened everywhere. A team on Mars developed a way to hide ships from alien sensors by coating them in a special material that absorbed all forms of detection. A group of hackers on Earth found a way to listen to alien communications and began working on disrupting them. A factory on Europa that made mining equipment was converted to produce missiles in a matter of hours. But it was not just the scientists and soldiers who rose to the challenge. Ordinary people did extraordinary things. Farmers donated their harvests to feed troops. Teachers organized children to help with supply sorting. Elderly people who remembered old wars came out of retirement to share their knowledge. Everyone found something they could do. The hegemony observers reported all of this to X. He studied the data with growing confusion. "They are not behaving correctly," he said to his military commander, a massive crystalline being named Han. "They should be fighting each other for resources. They should be trying to negotiate for individual survival. Instead, they are working together," Han finished. "I have seen the reports. It is strange, but it does not matter. They have 800 ships. We have 10,000. They could have 8 million ships and it would not matter. Our technology is superior. Our experience is greater. They will learn this when the deadline passes." X was not so sure. Something about the way the human leader had looked at him bothered him. He had seen fear in thousands of species. He had seen anger and desperation and despair. But he had never seen what he saw in his eyes. She had not been afraid. She had been excited. The deadline came and went. Humanity did not surrender. The fleet began to move toward Earth, expecting to crush whatever pitiful defense the humans had assembled. Admiral had positioned his fleet behind Earth's moon. It was not a strong defensive position. His ships were outnumbered and outmatched in every measurable way. But he had one advantage that did not show up in any calculation. His crews wanted to fight. The first wave of hegemony ships came around the moon expecting to face terrified defenders. Instead, they found themselves flying into a trap. Human ships hidden by the new stealth coating appeared from nowhere and opened fire. The quantum disruption, weapons tore through shields that had stopped every weapon the hegemony had ever faced. The first dreadnought to fall was called the Eternal Victory. It had been in service for 3 million years. It had destroyed countless enemy fleets. It exploded in less than 10 seconds, torn apart by weapons that should not have existed. Han watched from his command ship as 6 more of his dreadnoughts fell in the first minute of combat. He had expected to lose no ships at all. The humans were not supposed to have anything that could hurt him. "How is this possible?" he demanded. No one could answer him. The humans were using tactics that made no sense. They were sacrificing ships to take out single targets. They were ramming their own vessels into his when their weapons ran dry. They were fighting with a fury and desperation that the hegemony had never encountered. On one human destroyer, the captain realized his ship was too damaged to fight. His weapons were offline. His engines were failing, and most of his crew was dead. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered or retreated. Captain was not reasonable. He aimed his dying ship at the nearest enemy cruiser and pushed his engines to maximum. His last transmission was heard by every human in the fleet. "Tell my wife I love her, and tell these crystal bastards that the destroyer sends its regards." The cruiser exploded. So did Captain and his brave crew. By the end of the first day of fighting, the hegemony had lost 112 ships. It was more than they had lost in the previous million years combined. Humanity had lost 200 ships and thousands of lives. The numbers still favored the hegemony by a massive margin, but something had changed, something that all the calculations in the galaxy could not measure. For the first time in 60 million years, the hegemony knew what it felt like to bleed. And far away on Earth, watching the battle reports come in, allowed herself a small moment of hope. The war was far from over. They might still lose everything, but they had proven something important. Humans could hurt the hegemony, and if they could hurt them, maybe, just maybe, they could beat them. She turned to her advisors. "Send a message to every human world. Tell them what happened today. Tell them we drew first blood, and tell them this is only the beginning." The message spread across 17 star systems, and on every world, humans who had been afraid began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win this war. The war that the hegemony expected to last 3 days stretched into 3 months, then 6 months, then a year. And with each passing day, the impossible became more and more real. Humanity was not just surviving, humanity was fighting back. Admiral developed new ways of war that the hegemony had never seen. He called it ghost warfare. Instead of meeting the enemy in large fleet battles that humanity would always lose, he broke his forces into hundreds of small strike teams. These teams would appear from nowhere, attack supply lines and communication stations, and disappear before the enemy could respond. The hegemony did not know how to fight ghosts. Their military doctrine was based on overwhelming force. They had always met their enemies in open battle and crushed them with superior numbers and firepower. But the humans refused to fight that way. Lieutenant Commander became the most famous of the ghost warfare commanders. She led a squadron of 12 small ships that destroyed over 200 enemy vessels in 6 months. Her tactics were unpredictable and often seemed insane. She would hide her ships inside asteroid fields, using the rocks as cover. She would pretend to retreat, leading enemy ships into traps. Once, she hid her entire squadron inside the wreckage of a destroyed hegemony cruiser, and waited 3 days until an enemy supply convoy passed close enough to attack. Her most legendary mission came when hegemony forces established a major command station in the system. The station was protected by 500 warships. Any direct attack would be suicide. Did not attack directly. Instead, she took her damaged flagship, the destroyer Orpheus, and piloted it alone toward the station. Her crew had been evacuated to other ships. She had rigged the Orpheus with every explosive and quantum weapon they had left. The hegemony ships let her approach. They thought she was surrendering. By the time they realized the truth, it was too late. The Orpheus crashed directly into the command station's main reactor. The explosion destroyed the station and 7 nearby ships, but more importantly, had been transmitting tactical data the entire time. She had mapped every defensive position, every patrol route, every weakness in the hegemony formation. Her final transmission, sent seconds before impact, gave humanity everything they needed to drive the hegemony out of the system entirely. Her last words were simple: "The Orpheus has made her final delivery. Make it count." They made it count. The battle lasted 3 more days after sacrifice. When it was over, humanity had won their first major system. The news spread across the galaxy. But the war was not only fought with weapons. Understood that the hegemony's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. They ruled 300 species through fear and force. Those species had surrendered because they believed they had no choice. Humanity was proving that there was always a choice. She ordered a new kind of attack. Human ships began broadcasting messages on every frequency, in every language the hegemony used. "You are not alone," the messages said. "You do not have to accept slavery. Watch us. We are fighting back, and if we can fight, so can you." At first, nothing seemed to happen. The subjugated species had been broken for so long that most had forgotten what freedom even meant. But the messages kept coming, and slowly, something began to change. They were one of the oldest enslaved species. They had served the hegemony for 40 million years. They had been farmers and builders on there until the came. Now they were slaves, forced to work in mines and factories across the empire. A young named X, who shared a name with the ambassador by cruel coincidence, heard the human broadcasts. He watched recordings of human ships attacking hegemony forces. He saw beings who were smaller and weaker than his own people refusing to kneel. "If they can fight," he whispered to others in his work camp, "why cannot we?" The first rebellion was small, just 50 workers who refused to continue mining. The hegemony response was swift and brutal. All 50 were executed publicly as an example. But instead of ending the resistance, the execution sparked more. Others saw their brothers die standing tall, and something that had been sleeping for 40 million years began to wake up. They were next. They were a species of engineers who had been forced to build weapons for the hegemony. They began building those weapons with hidden flaws, designed to fail at critical moments. Hegemony ships started experiencing mysterious malfunctions that their crews could not explain. The silicates, a race of silicon-based beings who could survive in the vacuum of space, started sabotaging hegemony stations from the outside. They would drift through space, pretending to be debris, then attach themselves to enemy ships and disable key systems. X watched his empire begin to crack from the inside. He had spent his entire existence believing that the hegemony was eternal and unchangeable. Now, he saw that it had always been held together by nothing more than the belief that resistance was impossible. The humans had shattered that belief. "We must destroy them completely," Han argued in the Hegemony High Council. "Not just defeat them. We must wipe out every human everywhere. We must make an example so terrible that no species will ever consider resistance again." X shook his head. "It is too late for that. The damage is done. Every species in our empire has seen humans fight. They have seen us bleed. You cannot make beings forget what they have seen." Then what do you suggest? We request a negotiation. We offer the humans favorable terms. We end this war before it destroys everything. The council debated for days. Some wanted total war, others wanted surrender. In the end, they chose a middle path. They would offer humanity a chance to end the fighting. Perhaps the humans were tired. Perhaps they would accept peace. Received the offer on the second anniversary of the war's beginning. The hegemony would withdraw from human space. Humanity would be allowed to govern themselves as a semi-independent state within the empire. No humans would be enslaved. In exchange, humanity would stop broadcasting their messages of rebellion and would help the hegemony put down the uprisings that were spreading across their territory. It was, by any reasonable measure, a victory. Humanity had fought the greatest power in the galaxy to a standstill. They had won concessions that no species had ever won. They could end the war now and save millions of lives. Read the offer carefully. She thought about the soldiers who had died. She thought about and Captain and all the others who had given everything. She thought about the rebels who had been executed, and the engineers who risked torture to sabotage enemy ships, and the silicates who drifted through cold space to fight for freedom. She thought about what it would mean to abandon them all. Her response was broadcast on every frequency, in every language, across the entire galaxy. You want to end this war, so do we, but not with a deal that leaves billions still in chains. You offered us unconditional surrender when this began. Now we offer you the same terms. Free every species you have enslaved. Dissolve your empire, face justice for your crimes, or we keep fighting. She paused, then added one final line. And to every being in the galaxy who is listening, the hegemony is afraid. They are losing, keep fighting. We are coming. The war continued, and across 1,000 worlds, slaves who had forgotten hope began to remember what it felt like to believe in something bigger than survival. 3 years into the war, the cost of defiance had become terrifyingly clear. Earth's moon had been shattered by hegemony bombardment. Where humans had once looked up and seen a silver circle in the night sky, they now saw only a ring of broken rocks. 3 human colony worlds had been turned to glass. The population of New Taipei, nearly 8 million people, had been killed in a single attack that lasted less than an hour. Admiral's fleet had been reduced from 800 ships to just over 300. The hegemony had lost thousands of vessels, but they had thousands more to spare. For every ship humanity destroyed, the enemy seemed to have 2 more waiting. The rebellions among the enslaved species had spread, but they had also been brutally suppressed. The hegemony had pulled forces away from the war with humanity to crush uprisings on dozens of worlds. Millions of and others had died. The silicates had nearly been driven to extinction. Sat in her office on Earth and read the casualty reports. Her hands shook. She was 70 years old now, and the weight of every death felt like it was crushing her bones. She had sent so many people to die. She had inspired rebellions that had led to massacres. Sometimes, late at night, she wondered if she should have accepted surrender from the beginning. And then she would remember the images X had shown her on that first day. 300 species, enslaved or destroyed. 60 million years of tyranny. And she knew that surrender would only have delayed the suffering, not ended it. The hegemony made their final decision in the winter of the war's 3rd year. Han had been replaced after too many failures. The new military commander, a ruthless strategist named Al, proposed a simple plan. The humans fight for he told the council. They draw strength from their origin. If we destroy Earth, we break their spirit. Without Earth, they are just scattered colonies with no center, no purpose. They will fall apart and surrender. The council approved his plan. Every remaining hegemony ship in the local sector was gathered for a massive assault on Earth. 30,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, began moving toward humanity's home. Admiral learned of the attack through intercepted communications. He had 312 ships left, 312 ships against 30,000. He called a meeting with his senior officers. Their faces were tired and grim. They all knew what the numbers meant. "They are coming for Earth," said simply. "Everything they have. If they take Earth, the war is over. We lose." Captain Sarah, who had been promoted after designing the quantum weapons that had given humanity a fighting chance, spoke first. "Can we evacuate? Save as many people as possible. There is no time, and nowhere safe to go. They will hunt down every human until none remain." "Then we fight," said Commander James Walker, the same man who had been eating lunch in Central Park when the ships first appeared. He had risen through the ranks by surviving battles that killed everyone around him. "We fight until we cannot fight anymore." Nodded, "We fight, but I will not lie to you. This may be the end. I want every person in this fleet to know what they are fighting for. I want them to choose this, not be ordered into it." He broadcast a message to every ship in the human fleet. "This is Admiral. The enemy is coming for Earth with everything they have. I'm not going to tell you that we can win. The odds are against us. Many of us will die, maybe all of us. But I am going to tell you what we are fighting for. We are fighting for every person on Earth who is looking up at the sky right now, wondering if their children will live to see tomorrow. We are fighting for every colony that depends on us to hold the line. We are fighting for thee and the silicates who took up arms because we showed them that resistance was possible. If we fall here, they fall too. So I am asking you, not ordering you, to stand with me, to fight one more battle, to show the galaxy what humans are made of." He paused. "Anyone who wants to leave, I will not stop you. There is no shame in wanting to live, but I am staying, and I am fighting. Who is with me?" Not a single ship left. Every captain, every crew member, every soldier chose to stay and fight. The Battle of Sol began on a cold morning in December. The hegemony fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system and began advancing toward Earth. Human ships met them at the orbit of Jupiter. For 11 days, space around Earth burned with continuous combat. Human ships fought until their weapons ran out, then rammed enemy vessels. Ground forces on Mars and the lunar fragments held positions long after they should have been overrun. Civilian transports, armed with nothing but mining lasers, threw themselves into battle alongside military ships. Admiral commanded from the bridge of the Defiance until a direct hit killed him on the 7th day. Captain took command and kept fighting. When the Defiance was finally destroyed on the 9th day, she transferred her flag to a damaged cruiser and kept fighting. On Earth, watched the battle from a bunker beneath what used to be Paris. She had refused evacuation. If Earth fell, she intended to fall with it. On the 10th day, when humanity's fleet had been reduced to barely 100 ships, something appeared on the edge of the solar system. At first, the sensors could not identify it. Then the signals became clear and began to cry. Ships, thousands of ships, but not hegemony ships. They had come. They had stolen ships, built ships, commandeered anything that could fly. Their fleet was a mess of different designs and sizes, held together by nothing but desperation and hope. They had come, bringing vessels they had secretly sabotaged during their years of forced labor, and then repaired for their own use. The silicates had come, the survivors of their near extinction, carried on the hulls of ships because they needed no atmosphere. And they were not alone. Species whose names humanity did not even know. Species who had watched from afar as a young civilization, the oldest empire in the galaxy. Species who had been afraid to fight alone, but who now saw that they were not alone. A transmission came through on all frequencies. The voice was rough and strange to human ears, but the translator made the words clear. "We watched you refuse to kneel. You reminded us what it meant to stand. Now we stand with you. This is not your war anymore. This is everyone's war, and today we end it together." The hegemony fleet, caught between the battered human survivors and the unexpected fury of their former slaves, began to crumble. Ships that had conquered worlds for millions of years were torn apart by weapons that should never have touched them. Supreme Commander Al sent one final transmission before his flagship exploded under the combined fire of human and vessels. We created our own destroyers. We taught them to never surrender, and now we die by the lesson we taught. The Battle of Saul lasted 2 more days after the Allied fleet arrived. When it was over, the hegemony armada had been completely destroyed. 30,000 ships, reduced to debris floating in the dark between planets. Walked out of her bunker and looked up at the night sky. Where the moon had once been, she saw only scattered rocks. Where the stars had always shone, she now saw the lights of ships from 100 different worlds. Humanity had not won this victory alone, but humanity had started it. And now, together with the species they had inspired, they would finish it. The war was not over yet, but for the first time since that terrible day when the sky went dark above New York, allowed herself to truly believe that they would win. That was called Prime. It had been the center of the hegemony for 60 million years. Its cities were built from living crystal that had been grown over millions of generations. Its libraries contained the knowledge of 300 conquered civilizations. Its rulers had believed with absolute certainty that their empire would last forever. Now, the combined fleet of free species hung in orbit above it, and the rulers of the hegemony faced a choice they had never imagined they would have to make. Now 73 years old and looking far older after 4 years of war, led the delegation that descended to meet with the Hegemony Council. She was accompanied by representatives of the silicates, and dozens of other species who had fought for their freedom. The council chamber was a vast hall of crystal that sang with harmonics as beings moved through it. Once, it had hosted the surrender of countless species. Now, for the first time in 60 million years, they were not the ones in control. The remaining council members sat in their places. There were only 7 of them left. The others had died in the war or taken their own lives rather than face this moment. X was among the survivors. He looked at the small human woman who had set all of this in motion with a single smile. "You have won," he said. His voice was quiet, empty of the confidence he had once carried. "The fleet is destroyed. Our colonies are in rebellion. There is nothing left of what we built." "There is plenty left," replied. "Your people are still alive. Your world is still whole. That is more than you left for many of the species you conquered. Then you intend to destroy us, to do to us what we did to others." Looked at him for a long moment. She thought about everything that had happened, the billions who had died, Earth's shattered moon, the colonies burned to glass, the rebels executed as an example, all the suffering and sacrifice and loss that had brought them to this moment. She thought about how easy it would be to give the order, how much the victims deserved revenge, how satisfying it would be to watch the hegemony burn the way so many others had burned. And then she thought about what kind of galaxy she wanted to leave behind. "No," she said, "we are not you." The words seemed to strike X like a physical blow. He stared at her, his crystalline face flickering with colors that might have been confusion or shame or something else entirely. "I do not understand. You have every right to destroy us. Every reason. After what we did, after what we tried to do to you, you would show mercy." Stepped forward. Despite her age and exhaustion, her voice was strong and clear. "We did not fight to become the next tyrants. We fought because no one, no species, no empire, no matter how old or powerful, has the right to demand another being kneel. If we destroy you now, if we enslave your people the way you enslaved others, then we become everything we fought against. We prove that the galaxy is nothing but an endless cycle of conquest and cruelty." She paused and looked around the chamber, at the gathered representatives of species who had suffered so much. "We want something different. We want a galaxy where species work together instead of fighting each other, where knowledge is shared instead of stolen, where every being has the right to live free. That is what we fought for. That is what we are building. She turned back to X. Your empire is over. Your military is disbanded. Your leaders will face trial for their crimes against the species you harmed, but the people will survive. They will have a place in what comes next, just like everyone else. That is our offer. Accept it or face the consequences. The council members looked at each other. For beings who had ruled a galaxy, the concept of being subjects rather than masters was almost impossible to accept. But they had no choice left. Their fleet was gone. Their empire had crumbled, and the beings they had spent millions of years dominating were now standing over them, offering mercy that they had never shown to others. One by one, the council members lowered their heads in acceptance. X was the last. I have witnessed 92 surrenders, he said quietly. I never thought I would participate in one, and I never imagined that surrender could feel like this. Like what? Asked. Like relief. He looked at her with those strange blue points of light. For 60 million years, we maintained our empire through fear. We were afraid that if we showed weakness, others would destroy us. We were afraid that if we treated others as equals, we would be diminished. We spent millions of years being afraid, and we made everyone else afraid too. And now it is over. The fear is gone. I do not know what comes next, but I know that I do not have to be afraid anymore. The formal surrender was signed that day. The hegemony officially ceased to exist. In its place, proposed something that had never existed in the galaxy before, a union of equals called the Galactic Cooperative. The founding ceremony was held on Earth, in the rebuilt United Nations Plaza where X had first delivered his ultimatum. Representatives from over 300 species gathered to sign the founding charter. The document was simple. No species would be subjugated by another, all disputes would be resolved through negotiation, and all members would work together for the common good. X was there as a prisoner awaiting trial, but had arranged for him to speak at the ceremony. She believed the galaxy needed to hear from someone who had been on the other side. He stood before the assembled representatives, this ancient being who had overseen the surrender of so many civilizations. His crystal body seemed dimmer than it had been 4 years ago, as if something essential had gone out of him. For 60 million years, we ruled because we believed might was supreme, he said. We never understood why other species simply gave up when they faced us. We thought it was because they were weak. We thought it was because they recognized our superiority. We were wrong. He looked at the human delegation, and the survivors of the combined human fleet. They gave up because they believed they could not win. They calculated the odds and saw that resistance was hopeless. It was a logical decision, a rational decision, and we used that logic against them. We made sure every species believed that fighting back was impossible so that none would try. He paused. And then we met humans, and humans refused to do the math. They looked at our 10,000 ships and their 800 ships, and they decided to fight anyway. Not because they thought they could win, not because they had some secret weapon that would save them, but because they simply refused to accept any outcome where they did not fight. His voice grew quieter, filled with something that might have been wonder. I have asked myself many times why humans are different. I have studied their history, their culture, their biology, and I believe I have found the answer. Humans do not fight because they think they can win. They fight because they cannot imagine any other way to be. Fighting against impossible odds is not a choice for them. It is simply what they are. He looked at. That is either madness or greatness, perhaps both. Smiled, the same smile she had given him on that first day 4 years ago. We call it being human. The ceremony concluded with the raising of a new flag above the plaza. It showed a single star surrounded by hundreds of smaller stars, representing all the species who now stood together as equals. In the years that followed, the Galactic Cooperative grew stronger. Old wounds healed slowly, but they did heal. They were tried for their crimes and forced to make amends, but they were not destroyed. They became scholars and teachers, sharing the knowledge they had accumulated over 60 million years. Humanity became known throughout the galaxy not as conquerors, but as liberators, as protectors, as the species that had looked upon the greatest empire in history and said no. New phrases entered the languages of 1,000 worlds. When someone faced impossible odds and refused to give up, others would say they were fighting like a human. When someone chose principle over safety, they were said to have human courage. When someone extended mercy to a former enemy, they were following the human way. Died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 91, 23 years after the war ended. Her funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the cooperative. They came to honor the woman who had inspired their rebellion. They came to thank the leader who had never abandoned them. Even a delegation of came, including X, who had been pardoned after decades of working to undo the harm his empire had caused. At the end of the ceremony, X spoke one last time. She asked me once what happened to species who refused to surrender. I told her none had ever refused. I was wrong. There was one species long ago before I was born. They refused and we destroyed them completely, erased them from history. I did not mention them because I had forgotten they existed. We had made ourselves forget. He looked at the gathered mourners. Their name was the. They were our ancestors. Before we became the hegemony, we were once a small, defiant species who refused to bow to an empire older than ours. And when we won our freedom, we became the very thing we had fought against. He placed a crystal flower on its memorial. Perhaps humans will make the same mistake one day. Perhaps power corrupts everyone eventually. But today, I choose to believe that and her people have shown the galaxy a better way. A way where strength does not require cruelty, where victory does not require subjugation, where the measure of a species is not how many others they have conquered, but how many they have helped. He stepped back and looked up at the sky, where ships from 100 worlds hung in peaceful orbit. Thank you, humans. Thank you for reminding the galaxy what it means to stand. Thank you for refusing to kneel. And thank you for showing us that the cycle of conquest can be broken. The ceremony ended. The representatives departed. And across a galaxy that had known nothing but war and slavery for millions of years, beings of every shape and kind looked toward the future with hope. Because of one small, stubborn species that had refused to do the math. Because of humans,